It's 1942. World War II is raging, and in the middle of all that chaos, India is gearing up for its final all-or-nothing push for freedom. Today, we're diving deep into the story of the Quit India movement, a moment that truly changed everything. Let's get into it. It really all kicks off with these three simple but electrifying words: do or die. Now, coming from Mahatma Gandhi, the global icon of nonviolence, this was a shock to the system. This wasn't just another call for protest. Nope, this was an ultimatum. The tone was set. There was absolutely no going back. So what exactly was the Quit India movement? Well, it's also known as the August Kranti or the August Revolution, and really it was a massive nationwide demand for the British to pack their bags and leave. Immediately. No negotiations, no conditions. This was meant to be the final decisive knockout punch to colonial rule. All right, here's our game plan for today. We're going to start with that do or die call itself. Then we'll unpack why this whole thing was pretty much inevitable. We'll see how it turned into a revolution without leaders, look at how the British hit back, and finally wrap up with its huge, lasting legacy. Okay, first up, the do or die call. Let's look at how this movement actually got started and what exactly the Indian National Congress was putting on the table. So this didn't just happen out of the blue. There was a build-up. The dominoes started to fall in July when the Congress leadership decided, okay, it's time for a mass movement. Then came the big day, August 8th, in Bombay. The Quit India resolution is officially passed, and that very same night, Gandhi takes the stage and delivers the speech that sets the entire country on fire. And the demands? They were crystal clear. There was no room for interpretation. Number 1, British rule ends now. Not later, now. Number 2, India is to be declared a free country. And number 3, a provisional government will be formed to take over. This time, there was just no compromise. But you've got to ask, why then? Why 1942? What made this moment the breaking point? Well, as we're about to see, it was a perfect storm of political anger, economic pain, and a world at war that made this uprising feel totally inevitable. First off, let's talk politics. People were just fed up. Decades of promises for more self-rule had gone nowhere. Big negotiations like the Cripps Mission had failed, leaving a bitter taste. On top of that, many nationalists felt the British were deliberately fanning the flames of division by supporting the Muslim League's call for a separate state. Patience had officially run out. But it wasn't just about high-level politics. This hit people in their daily lives hard. India was being squeezed dry to support the British war effort in World War II. That meant skyrocketing prices, shortages of basic things like food, and of course, higher taxes. Just imagine, rice was being exported out of the country, which was a huge factor in the horrific Bengal famine that followed. It was unbearable. And then you look outside and the world is on fire. The British were getting hammered by the Japanese in Southeast Asia, and the Japanese army was getting closer and closer to India's own borders. The British retreat from Burma was a chaotic disaster, and it exposed a lot of racial bias, which made people think, they can't even protect us. There was a growing sense that if India was going to be defended, Indians would have to do it themselves. Now, here's where the story takes a sharp turn. The British reacted instantly. They arrested Gandhi and the entire top leadership of the Congress Party. They thought that would be the end of it, but they were so wrong. What they created instead was something new, something radical, a leaderless revolution. So this is the key question, right? What made the Quit India movement so different from the big protests that came before, like non-cooperation? Well, the answer is everything. Once the leaders were taken off the board, the game completely changed. Just look at the contrast here. The old playbook was all about peaceful resistance, slow and steady, using highly trained activists. But 1942, that playbook got thrown right out the window. This was a full-blown uprising from day one. The goal wasn't just to resist, it was to actively destroy British authority. For a lot of people, the goal, freedom, now justified pretty much any means necessary. And this is where it gets wild. With the big names in jail, the movement just exploded from the ground up. Students, can you believe it, were suddenly at the forefront, leading the charge. Secret underground networks popped up everywhere. And, in some places, people actually succeeded in overthrowing the local British administration and setting up their own parallel governments. Incredible! This underground network was basically the new nervous system of the rebellion. You had amazing figures like Jayaprakash Narayan, Aruna Asaf Ali, and Usha Mehta, who actually ran a secret radio station to broadcast news. It was like something out of a spy movie. They worked from the shadows, keeping the spirit of do or die alive across the country. Of course, the British Empire wasn't just going to sit back and let this happen. They struck back, and they struck back hard. So now let's get into the brutal repression, but also why it didn't entirely work, and who decided to sit this movement out. Just let that number sink in for a second. Over 100,000 people. That's how many were rounded up and detained, often without any trial. The British declared the Congress Party illegal and launched a massive crackdown. The message was loud and clear: we will crush this rebellion. But here's the amazing part. Even with all that force, in different pockets across India, people carved out their own little zones of freedom. These were the Prati Sarkars, or parallel governments. In Balia, they stormed the jail and freed their leaders. In Tamluk, they organized relief for a cyclone. And in Saftara, their government lasted for years, running their own courts and libraries. Now, it's really crucial to understand that not everyone was on board with Quit India. The call did not have universal support. Major groups like the Muslim League, the Communist Party, and the Hindu Mahasabha all opposed it for their own reasons. And they were joined by the government bureaucracy, most of the princely states, and key leaders like B.R. Ambedkar and Periyar. So the situation was complicated. For the Muslim League, this was a huge political opportunity. With their main political rivals, the Congress leadership, all in jail, they had a clear field. They used this time to build up their base and push their demand for a separate state for Pakistan. And this, tragically, went a long way in deepening the divide that would lead to partition just 5 years later. So that brings us to the big finish. The British did eventually suppress the movement on the ground. But what was the real legacy here? How did a movement that was seemingly crushed actually pave the way for freedom? Let's unpack the final chapter. If you think about India's mass movements as waves, the Quit India movement was a full-blown tsunami. You can see it right here. The non-cooperation movement was huge. The civil disobedience movement was even bigger. But 1942, that was on a whole other level of intensity, participation, and sheer radicalism. So what's the ultimate takeaway? Well, the Quit India movement was the point of no return. It shattered the illusion of British authority. It proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that the British could not govern India without the consent of its people, and that consent was officially gone. It brought up a new generation of leaders and basically guaranteed that as soon as the war was over, independence was coming. And that leaves us with this final thought. Was the movement a failure? Well, in the short term, you could argue that. It didn't force the British out in 1942. But in the long run, by making India ungovernable and proving that the will for freedom was unbreakable, it was a massive strategic victory. It was the final, defiant blow that made independence absolutely inevitable. A tactical loss, perhaps, but the move that won the war.